Hiya, listeners and Organauts. The music's playing, so I can only assume it's time for another Off the Rails podcast. I am the offrailgamer. Yes, I'm back again. It's lovely to be here, and allow me to welcome you to episode 28 of the Off the Rails video game podcast, which goes out on Spotify, Amazon Music, and Google Podcasts. Oh yeah, and YouTube every other Thursday. Now, here's the thing. Do you remember last year I released episode 3 with no gaming news because the air date coincided with my big drive back from a trip to Scotland? Well, you'll never Adam and Eve it, but just yesterday, if you're listening to this on the day the podcast first goes up, I made a big drive home from a trip to Scotland. Why am I telling you this, you may be asking yourself? Well, just like last year, I've opted to record this episode in advance, so there will be no gaming news this time either. That's no great loss though, as it's not often we can find anything noteworthy to discuss in that segment anyway. Right. So let me preempt any questions you might have around my seemingly annual trips or pilgrimages to Scotland, and I'll tell you a bit about the important work that takes me there each summer. Basically, when I was just a supple young boy, I was playing kickabout with some chums and we accidentally booted the ball over a wall. Well, being the sportiest and most agile of my comrades, I volunteered to scale the wall and get our ball back. The only problem was that I've always had a terrible head for heights, got severe case of the old vertigo, and fell crashing through the glass roof of a greenhouse. Thankfully, this was back in the 90s, and due to the fact I was wearing my rather fashionable parachute pants and anorak, I came away with no cuts or abrasions. Rather unfortunately, for yours truly, I had just inadvertently damaged some private property and had a debt to pay off that my 50p pocket money just wouldn't cover. And so it was that I became indebted to an evil sorcerer called Zarok, and once a year he enlists me to lead his army of the undead north to Gallowsmere, where we duke it out with Sir Daniel Fortescue. To date, we've suffered humiliation after humiliation at the hands of Fortescue, who has repeatedly sent us packing. The thing I don't understand, Organauts, is why hasn't Zarok just conjured up a zombie general to lead his army? I mean, I've never beaten the CPU on Sega Chess even. Also, I've just realised Zarok probably just fixed his greenhouse with magic rather than having to pay for a glazier. You could say that would have taken the pain out of it. You know, like the pain of glass, but also like the pain of having to find extra cash when household budgets are already tight enough as it is. Oh, come on, the joke wasn't that bad. I mean, I'll admit it wasn't good, but work with me here, will ya? Anyway, listen up. I never did have that kickabout with my friends. I never did fall through a greenhouse. I never did lead a zombie army to do battle with a skeleton man. And I never did know an evil sorcerer called Zarok. But I do get the feeling that this Zarok character, if I had made his acquaintance, would be the type of guy that would want me to direct your attention towards the podcast episode description, where you'll find links to all my social media accounts, YouTube, Twitch, X and TikTok. You'll also see I've included my email address to which you can write with any comments, questions or feedback and have the chance to get your message read out in the next Listener's Whispers, just as long as you can follow my 2 golden rules: keep it clean and don't be mean. Right, so what am I really doing in Scotland each year? Well, I really like visiting because it's a beautiful country and the people are really nice too, and I'm up there visiting friends. Or they might consider us acquaintances. I don't know. We're certainly not strangers, even if they would tell you they wish we were. Or even that they've met few stranger. Oh, look, you'd have to ask them. But they'll be washing their hair when you decide to call, so good luck with that. And can we have some gaming news, please? No, we can't have any gaming news, because as I was saying earlier, Oh right, that music tells me it's time for Listeners' Whispers, and that must mean that someone's written in. Let's see who it is and what they have to say. Hi offrailgamer and your Organauts, it's me again, Gemma. Do you remember I wrote in for your birthday podcast? Anyway, I feel like you misinterpreted my last email, so I thought I'd write in again because, well, I don't have much else going on right now anyway. Also, I wanted to let you know that since the Off the Rails anniversary episode, I have gone and watched the trailer for Forever Ago. I'm not sure I get it though, but mostly I prefer Fortnite if I'm being honest with you. I like the challenge it presents with online play. I haven't played Snail Maze, by the way, and I wasn't sure I liked what you may have been implying there. My first console was the original Xbox, and I've been Microsoft ever since. I don't know if I'd enjoy the 8-bit console era, and yes, I did Google it to make sure I got that right. Sorry I called you very old last time. I was a little hangry at the time of writing. I'm not sorry for losing you the game though, ha ha! You really are my favourite podcaster at the moment though, after the Chatterbix, Off Menu and Bad Friends podcasts that is, but don't feel too bad, those other shows probably have more money behind them. Thanks again for all the really good content you put out. Again, your choice if you think that should sound sarcastic or not. Your bestie, Gemma. Who we all remember is of course Gemma in South Shields, and I'd just like to thank you for taking the time to write in again, and I'll let you decide whether I'm being sarcastic or not. Only for the avoidance of any doubt, I'm not being sarcastic, but rather sincere. It really does my big heart good to see someone's taken the time to reach out. So thank you for that. I'm glad you had a look at the Forever Ago trailer, as it gives me the perfect opportunity to bring it up again now. I'm sorry you don't see in it what I do, but we can't all be the same, can we? As I've said previously, Fortnite isn't my personal cup of tea, but more than anything I think that's on me because I'm just not very good at online multiplayer shooters. I assure you I was implying nothing with my question as to your having played Snail Maze, it was simply a segue from your comment about Snail Mail. I hope no feelings were too badly hurt, as that was most certainly not the intention. Now, I suppose it's time to get into the main content of the show, but first, if you'd like me to read your message in the next Listener's Whispers, I'll just remind you that you can find my email address in the podcast episode description. That's offrailgamer@gmail.com. And, if you remember to keep it clean and don't be mean, I'll certainly try to read it out next time. As I'm sure you're all keenly aware, this Sunday is Whitsun, perhaps the most celebrated day of the year the world over. Perhaps not. But look, we're not really here to debate that, are we? Anyway, I thought we would celebrate Whitsun just a little early in the most appropriate way I could think of, with the celebration of video game villains. Or at least a selection of villains, as we probably don't have the time to visit kindness upon every single one. Here then are some bad guys I think are deserving of our attention. Kicking things off, I want to pay my respects to a quartet, as it were, so I'll just press F now quickly. And let's tip our hats to Inky, Pinky, Blinky and Clyde, the spectral superstars from the Pac-Man franchise. I mean, these guys had to get a mention, given they are the antagonists in one of the most important arcade classics in video game history. Also, although they're ghosts, these four really display some humanity in their fear alone. When any of the Pac-Man family swallow the large pill that grants them the ability to eat ghosts, yes, you did hear that correctly, the Phantasmic Four run for their, well, it seems wrong to say lives. But here's a question for you. Inky, Pinky, Blinky and Clyde are ghosts, right? Meaning they're not alive anymore. Well, what if the four of them made some poor life choices with drugs? Specifically the pills Pac-Man keeps popping, and they're actually just trying to stop Pac-Man from making the same mistake. I'm pretty sure that's not canon, but it's certainly food for thought. And I don't mean the cherries floating around the screen. Honestly though, I can't celebrate them as video game villains if I'm going to go and make out they're actually good guys and just misunderstood. So for the record, they are most definitely bad boys. Nintendo has some good villains, and I've certainly built shrines to more than just one of them. For this one, I really want to mess with your head again and pose a thought that came to my mind at the end of Super Mario Galaxy, which I think turned out all to be a dream. And that got me to thinking, what if Bowser's not actually a bad guy, but just really good friends, maybe more, with Princess Peach. In this scenario, Mario would be a big bully who keeps attacking Bowser, and these games are actually just the mental gymnastics Mario does in his head to justify his behaviour. Peach is too scared of Mario to stand up and say anything, and here's the kicker, Mario's so high on mushrooms he's running around like some kind of Viking berserker. But of course, that's definitely not canon, and that's the last time I'm going to try painting any of these devious characters in a positive light. So what is it about Bowser that is commendable then? Well, unlike economics in the real world, Bowser clearly does allow his wealth to trickle down to the little guy, as he's created thousands of jobs and seems to be keeping at least half the Mushroom Kingdom employed. Precisely how politicians would try and fool us that capitalism's supposed to work. Also, Bowser has an absolutely rocking castle, and if there's one thing you should know about me by now, it's that I'm a big fan of a good castle. No, don't worry, I wouldn't really expect you to know that about me, as I don't think it's come up before. And, in totally unorthodox fashion, I'm going to break here briefly to catch you up on what I've been playing recently. Over on YouTube, we've been hanging out with the PS2. I had a look at Dog's Life, which is a terrible game, but we did learn how to make our playable character poop, which was important because we were able to get into the house and poop in the middle of the kitchen floor. Furthermore, we were able to recreate my favourite news story from the Isle of Wight County Press. There's a car that drives back and forth through the farm in Dog's Life, but it will stop if you walk in front of it, giving you the chance to jump up and, to quote Amy Ryan, lay a mud monkey right on the bonnet. Does this make it worth grabbing a copy of Dog's Life for yourself? Certainly not. It really is quite a bad game. We then had a little gander at Mortal Kombat Deception, specifically Puzzle Combat, in which you essentially play Puyo Puyo, only every time you clear some blobs your character will fight your opponent at the bottom of the screen. It's pretty good fun if I'm honest. Then we took a little look at Chess Combat, which somehow makes chess even more difficult than it already ever was. Needless to say, I cut it short because there was no way we were going to see anything but defeat on that one. Off channel, I continued running around ancient Greece in Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Honestly, this game is more massive than I'd remembered, but I am at least somewhere close to heading into the end. That's if I don't keep getting sidetracked by everything else there is to do on the map besides the main questline. I feel really bad because I've still got God of War Ragnarok waiting for me to go back and finish it, and Avatar Frontiers of Pandora and Spider-Man 2 itching to be played as well. And here I am swanning about the Aegean Sea on essentially an ancient Greek super yacht. I also gave my Wii some much needed love and attention, popping My Sims Kingdom in to see what that game's all about. And you know, the more time I spend with the Wii, the more I come to realise how massively underrated the console is. In My Sims Kingdom, the kingdom itself is falling apart, basically just old and crumbling down. You get named as the new Wandalier, which basically means you're given a magic wand and are trusted with travelling round and putting everything back together again. It's somewhat cutesy in style, and so far I haven't encountered any real threat. It's another great title to stick on when you're looking for a totally chillaxed game session. But the humour in My Sims Kingdom kind of puts me in mind of the Lego games, so if you like those, this might be a game for you too. And lastly for this segment, I also dusted off the Analog Pocket and completed Super Mario Land 2 6 golden coins. I then started up a playthrough of Sims 2 on the Game Boy Advance and have been practicing and trying to hone my skills with Sonic Spinball. The Analog Pocket really is an incredible bit of kit, with its ability to play all the old cartridges from so many different console systems. Anyway, I think that's enough of what I've been playing recently, so let's get back to our praiseworthy video game villains, and next up, I want to talk about the Riddler from the Batman Arkham games. Now, he may not be the obvious choice, but he certainly is a villain, and I think that we should actually admire him simply because of how conscientious he is. I mean, in the Arkham games, everything's looking pretty bleak, with supervillains running amok and getting up to some truly heinous crimes. Then enter Edward Nygma, who's taken the time to painstakingly set up some intricate games and mild diversions for the Caped Crusader, which will undoubtedly keep his mind sharp for the other challenges he's facing. So, on behalf of us all, I'd like to say thank you, Eddie. I don't think you hear that enough, but I think you're genuinely the supervillain we need, even if we don't deserve you. This next entry might prove a bit of a hard sell, but bear with me. No, I haven't got a bear with me, don't worry. Anyway, what about that Janken the Great, eh? I mean, he's got the word great in his name, so I probably don't need to give any further explanation as to why he deserves more love than he's used to getting. But I feel like that would be a bit of a cop-out, so I will expand. We are, of course, visiting Redaxion and Alex Kidd in Miracle World for this entry. Now, Janken the Great is described as a tyrant, and as I understand, has dethroned Alex's father, the king, and started turning the population into stone. But to defeat him, Janken challenges you to a game of rock, paper, scissors, which suggests to me this guy is just starved for attention. Maybe if a few more people had taken a chance on being friends with him instead of alienating him, he could have been a more rounded and personable individual. And that's why I'm petitioning to get Janken more hugs. And, talking of dethroning, do you remember when Mario returned home from Sarazaland to find Wario had locked Mario out of his stately home? Well, Wario is the next villain I want to talk about, and there are so many reasons to like this guy. I think I'm going to have to talk pretty quick to make sure I don't end up devoting the rest of the podcast to him mine. First up, there's his wardrobe. I think Wario looks fabulous in his purple overalls, and pairing it with the rolled up yellow shirt sleeves has made for a timeless classic look. Then there's his strength. Wario isn't one to let a stone wall stand in the way between him and his intended destination. Just one shoulder barge, and he's the other side, having made that rock face look a right mug. And of course there's Wario's derriere as well. He's packing booty, and he's not afraid to use it, slamming enemies cheek first between a rock and a hard place, which I understand is what he calls his butt cheeks. But Wario's also had some amazing games of his own, from Wario Land to WarioWare. I'm not counting Wario's Woods, although that ain't bad either. And lastly, Wario has the best race courses in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. So, can we get a standing ovation for this man, please? And please be seated again, because we've other video game villains who still deserve a mention, and this next one is a scientist, ladies and gentlemen. One who conducts experiments on animals, which I am totally against, by the way, but it's not his work that makes me want to big up Professor Neo Cortex from the Crash Bandicoot games. Cortex, in spite of his big head, is a total buffoon. You could be cruel and go so far as to call him a blithering idiot, but I don't want to be scathing of the fellow. The reason I think he deserves a spot on this list is because of his comedic antics. We just can't help but laugh at this guy's extreme misfortune, which is always so large to life. Whether he's triggering his own booby traps or simply falling on his butt, Neo Cortex is the absolute master of slapstick comedy, rivaling the likes of the Three Stooges or Wile E. Coyote from the Looney Tunes Roadrunner classics. He's spread a lot of laughter over the years. You know me, and you know I love a good on-rail shooter, and you know one of my favourite games is Time Crisis, which is precisely why I want to talk about Albert Wesker from Resident Evil. Only not really, of course. This next spot is reserved for Wild Dog. Now, there's not much I could find to say about Wild Dog that's particularly complimentary, but he does always seem to keep his cool in a crisis. A time crisis, if you will. But what is also admirable about this guy is his persistence and the fact that he just keeps coming back for more, even when you're certain he couldn't possibly have survived the events of the last game. At this point, it's almost like bumping into an old friend when he crops up. Let's get legal for a moment, as our next entry, although isn't a villain, is certainly an adversary, and not above using some very underhanded tactics in the courtroom. I am of course talking about Edgeworth from the Ace Attorney games. And you're right, he's not a villain, and therefore doesn't really belong in this discussion, so I will keep his entry brief, but arguably he does fill the position of a video game antagonist, so I think I can justify giving him a little time here. Anyway, Besides his extravagant attire, complete with frilly cravat, Edgeworth is annoying as all heck in the courtroom, right up until he finds himself accused of murder no less, with no one prepared to put their careers on the line and defend him. It is during this episode that I think we find Edgeworth to be a much more sympathetic character than I'd given him credit previously in the game. Now I have just one more villain that I want to recognise in this evening's presentation, and this last one is a scientist, ladies and gentlemen, one who conducts experiments on animals, which I am totally against, by the way, but it's not his work that makes me want to big up Dr. Robotnik from the Sonic the Hedgehog games. Dr. Robotnik is, I think it would be safe to say, not half as smart as he thinks he is, creating badniks to do his bidding and then ranting at their dim-witted nature when they fail to get the job done. It's a poor craftsman who blames his tools for shoddy work on completion. And it's his lack of self-awareness at his own shortcomings that provides so much of the humour in Robotnik's inevitable demise every time we hear him yell, "I hate that hedgehog!" He invests so much time and energy into developing unnecessarily elaborate traps for Sonic, which almost always backfire on him in the end. I spoke of Neocortex earlier, but Robotnik was pretty much doing it first. And there you have it, listeners, a selection of video game villains that I think deserve some love, or else they might, if they weren't so infuriating, making our lives so difficult in trying to bring them down, or bring them to justice. These guys are all jerks. I don't know what you were thinking trying to defend the likes of the indefensible like that. Anyway, Organauts, I should have said at the top of the show, I'm classing this as episode 1 of series 2 of the Off the Rails podcast, and you may have noticed I've updated the logo a little. So that's that. Bye! No, but seriously, thank you for listening to me prattle on for another episode, and I'll catch you right back here in 2 weeks' time. Bye, guys!